Hello and welcome back to our lecture on Hofstede's cultural taxonomy. We all know that there are 6 dimensions of cultures in the current Hofstede's framework on national values. In video lecture 2 of module 3, I already introduced the first 3 dimensions, namely power distance, individualism versus collectivism, and masculinity versus femininity. In this video lecture, I will focus on the other 3 dimensions of Hofstede's 6D model: uncertainty avoidance, long-term versus short-term orientation, and indulgence and restraint. Some implications for foreign language teaching are also discussed at the end of this video. I hope this lesson will help you have better understanding of cultural differences and generate some ideas of integrating culture contents in language teaching. Let's begin. We'll first take a look at the 4th dimension called uncertainty avoidance. A concern of all cultures is how they will adapt to changes and cope with uncertainties and ambiguity or unclearness. According to Hofstede, this dimension describes the extent to which people within a culture feel comfortable or made nervous by unclear or unknown situations. People may try to avoid such situations by establishing more structured and following strict rules. It should be noted that uncertainty avoidance is not the same as risk avoidance. People from high uncertainty avoidance cultures tend to feel nervous in unpredictable situations. They don't like changes and are highly resistant to change. Strangers and unusual behaviors and ideas are less welcome. As people prefer to avoid uncertainty and ambiguity, strict rules and regulations are developed to control and instruct social behaviors, and everyone is expected to follow. Plans and daily routines are more preferred. Japan, for example, has a rating of 92, which makes it one of the highest uncertainty avoidance countries in the world. Japan, for example, has a rating of 92, which makes it one of the highest uncertainty avoidance countries in the world. In Japan, a lot of time is spent on planning and preparing for the future to reduce risk as much as possible. Also, the Japanese culture has many traditions and social etiquettes, and these things are taken very seriously. What people should do are usually described in great details in etiquette books as well as in public notices. For example, what you see on the screen are the Japanese instructions on how to use toilets in different languages. People from cultures with low avoidance of uncertainty tend to feel more comfortable with ambiguity and unpredictable situations. They tend to accept uncertainty as a way of life. Uncertainty-accepting cultures maintained a more relaxed attitude with different opinions and people. Strangers might be more welcome, and what is different might be seen as good. Besides, weak uncertainty avoidance index societies try to have fewer rules and believe that practice counts more than rules. An illustration is that in Vietnam, we have the saying, "Custom rules the law," or "Phép vua thua lệ làng." Some examples of countries with low uncertainty avoidance are Denmark, Sweden, and Vietnam. Cultural differences in uncertainty avoidance can also be observed in the classroom. In higher uncertainty avoidance cultures, teachers are expected to have all the answers, and their answers are often viewed as absolute truth. Students will want more structured learning, or in other words, more detailed instructions from teachers are expected. Assignments should be described in great details, and good teachers should use simple language. In a lower uncertainty avoidance culture, teachers are more likely to say, "I don't know," and the classroom learning may be open-ended with no timetables and broad assignments. Different opinions and new ideas from the students are welcome. The fifth dimension of culture is the long-term versus short-term orientation index. Every society has to maintain some links with its own past while dealing with the challenges of the present and the future. Societies prioritize these two goals differently. Long-term versus short-term orientation refers to the extent to which a society exhibits a future-oriented perspective rather than a near-term point of view. In other words, it refers to whether a society places more value on the past, the present, or the future. Cultures demonstrating a long-term time orientation will be more concerned with the future and focus their efforts on future-oriented goals. People are willing to delay short-term material or social success or even short-term pleasure in order to prepare for the future. Therefore, there is a strong tendency to save and invest. If you have this cultural perspective, you value thrift, efforts, and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances. Cultures demonstrating a short-term orientation will be more concerned with the past and present and will focus their efforts and beliefs on matters related to the short term. Members in short-term orientation cultures are expected to respect traditions and fulfill their social duties. Meanwhile, they tend to view societal changes with suspicion, which means they have a strong tendency to analyze new information to check whether it is true. The Chinese and Vietnamese, for example, typically have a long-term orientation. People work hard and tend to save and invest money to prepare for the future. Many parents invest a large amount of money on their children's education, hoping that their children could do better than they do. An example of short-term orientation culture is America. The US businesses measure their performance in a short-term basis, with profit and loss statements being issued on a quarterly basis. This also drives individuals to strive for quick results within the workplace. More than that, corporate social responsibility plays an important role in a firm's life in the US. It is not enough for companies to generate a profit. They are expected to conduct their business in an ethical manner and to produce an overall positive impact on society. The last dimension of Hofstede's framework is indulgence versus restraint. This dimension is defined as the extent to which people try to control their desires and impulses based on the way they were raised. Impulsive means a sudden strong wish to do something. Relatively weak control of desire is called indulgence, and relatively strong control is called restraint. Cultures can therefore be described as indulgent or restrained. An indulgent society allows relatively free gratification of basic and natural human desire related to enjoying life and having fun. Gratification here refers to the satisfaction of overall enjoyment of life instead of the satisfaction of human desires in general. Members of indulgent culture feel that they have freedom to live their life as they please. Leisure is important, and people tend to spend as they wish rather than save money. For example, United States is an indulgent society in which people place a priority on their sense of freedom and personal enjoyment through leisure time. work hard and play hard has become a lifestyle in American culture. It suggests that by working hard, your leisure time is more interesting as you'll have money to spend. Also, shopping has become one of the favorite leisure activities. Restraint stands for a society that controls the gratification or satisfaction of needs and regulates it by means of strict social order and rules. Members of restrained societies may feel that they have little freedom to enjoy their life and having fun. They tend to save rather than spend money because thrift is important. Indonesia, South Korea, and Vietnam score low on the indulgence index and therefore are examples of restrained societies. Although cultural taxonomies such as Hall's high and low context cultural framework and Hofstede's dimensions of culture generally offer a clear picture of different cultural patterns across cultures, there are some cautions for you when applying such frameworks. First, you should not assume that everyone in a culture behaves in certain ways. It's important to keep in mind that Hofstede's work measured cultural dimension at a national rather than individual level. Within every culture, you'll find individuals that have different tendencies from those described at the national level. Second, you should be cautious when making generalizations about a specific culture. Although UK and the US share a wide range of cultural similarities, these two countries are largely different in a key index, the long-term versus short-term orientation. The UK scores 51 while the US scores 2, making it a short-term orientation culture. Alright, so far I have explained Hofstede's cultural taxonomy. The 6 dimensions of Hofstede's model on national values are power distance, collectivism versus individualism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty avoidance, long-term versus short-term orientation, and finally indulgence versus restraint. After this lesson, you should be able to define the 6 dimensions of Hofstede's cultural framework, describe the different values associated with each dimension, and recall examples that represent each type of Hofstede's classifications. There are some implications for language teachers when studying cultural frameworks that describe differences in cultural patterns. First, teachers can apply the theory in explaining cultural differences in intercultural communications to their students. For example, people from high-context cultures such as Vietnam favor indirect styles of communication, while Americans who are from low-context cultures generally prefer direct style of communication. Second, cultural frameworks are the tools to help develop students' awareness of and respect for cultural differences, which are necessary for them in the globalization context. Moreover, learning a foreign language through learning about culture can be highly motivated. Third, as cultural taxonomies also explain the impacts of culture on teaching and learning styles, studying these frameworks may help language teachers to develop appropriate teaching strategies in the classroom. For instance, Vietnam is classified as a large power distance culture. Therefore, Vietnamese students tend to expect teacher outlined paths for them instead of doing the tasks on their own. Students rarely challenge teachers' ideas and opinions in class, which make them appear to be passive learners. Therefore, language teachers should design activities to develop learners' autonomy and create a more open environment in the classroom so that large power distance should not be a barrier. Well, that's the end of this lesson. Thank you for listening and bye for now.